Welcome everyone to the Bugyan podcast. In this podcast, we network and talk with leaders in the cybersecurity industry, technical professionals in the cybersecurity industry, so that the people watching this podcast, including students or CXOs, can learn from their experiences and implement it in their own life as well. Today, we have with us Anant Srivastava. He is an overall veteran in the overall cybersecurity industry with over a decade of multifaceted experience in network, mobile application, as well as Linux security. He's not just a tech guy, but also an open source advocate and an entrepreneur. He has led some impactful open source projects, including Android Tamer and Code Vigilant. Anant, I'm sure many of you may be knowing him. He's no stranger to the overall global stage. He has spoken many times at Black Hat, has given multiple talks as well, multiple trainings as well. And he's currently running his own company called Cyfinoid Research, wherein they're focusing on cybersecurity research. And if that's not enough, he's been documenting all of this in his blog for over 15 years now, which is an insanely long time. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Anant. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Trevor, for inviting me.
All right, so we'll dive right into it, Anant. So you've been in the industry for a while, clearly, and you've seen it transform over a decade. I believe, Tamagna was telling me before there wasn't even a role called security engineer, and now, of course, organizations have CISOs and everything else. How do you think the overall space has changed, and how do you think your own work as an InfoSec person has changed over the course of the last 15 years? One major significant change.
So I put it in three different word groups. We used to be chased because we were finding bugs, so people were chasing us with court orders and whatnot, to now we are getting paid to find bugs. We used to have fun doing hacking, to we are now being employed to do InfoSec. Now, hacking and InfoSec are two different things for me. Hacking is all fun and exploration, whereas InfoSec is what I get paid to do. That's kind of the major change that has happened. And when you say how it has impacted the work, a large portion of efforts used to be around convincing people that why do you need it, to now where there's so much information publicly available that people come to us saying, hey, I have this thing, I'm working on this product or developing something, how can you help me secure it? So that's kind of the shift that is there in very small way.
That's very interesting, Anant. In fact, the way you're talking about convincing people, right? I feel that at least now there is a minimum VAPT requirement that has come in every company. Before, I understand that used to be there as well. But what is your opinion on, more modern products, say like an EDR deploying, say an IAM solution, identity management or something else? Do you feel that companies are becoming more and more proactive towards implementing these more modern solutions as well? Or do you still think a VAPT kind of thing is still what's going around?
You'll find the whole spectrum. That's the fun with business. You'll find people who still don't want to do anything at all. Whatever is done is basically the bare minimum that is required to pass through all the compliance. Because ultimately, InfoSec gets into the industry because of compliance. On the other side of the spectrum, you have people who are basically trying to find, okay, what could be the potential impact that can happen in my product, and I'm going to try and solve it. The way I suggest people to look at it is, what is your audience level? If you're building a product which is going to be serving 4 people playing a Ludo game, you don't have to worry about security at that point. Get your product done. But if you're building something which is going to be used by governments of different nations, then you have to worry about every single thing that can be thrown towards it, including opposing nations trying to attack that environment. So the limitation that we put on security, that, hey, a person needs to know a certain level of skill set or have certain amount of budget, that goes out of the window. Anything and everything is possible as an attack vector. So that's the spectrum. You pick your place in that spectrum, and based on that, you decide how much security do you want to include.
Makes sense, Anant. And do you think this logic that you mentioned with regards to who is your audience is one of the many aspects that a company has to consider? Because from a lot of how we sell, right, or many other co-founders or other friends sell as well, is looking at the scale of the organization as well, right? With regards to, okay, I have so many employees, I need to deploy this solution. So what other aspects do you think a company might consider in this kind of?
So this is where I'm going to draw experience from growing the company aspect. When you have a company which is two people company, you and your co-founder, you both trust each other. You don't have to worry about one person stealing emails or sending data out via email. When you have 10 people company, you have trusted people who are trusted by way of reference. When you have 20 people company, that reference is becoming thinner. By 50, you're basically hiring from public. You don't know the person. You've just hired them. You can't trust them to the level of trust that you had for first 5 employees. So the security game also boils down to, especially the EDR, XDR, and these kind of solutions, boils down to one, what is the level of experience that people have with regards to technology? For example, a very basic way to look at it. A receptionist that I have, or a person who is working in admin or an HR division, I would ensure their system is loaded with all sorts of security measures right from day one. Because they're not tech savvy. But if I have a pen tester and I load their system with all the EDRs, XDRs, and whatnot, they won't be able to do their job at the very start. I'll have to do some trust building that, yes, I am trusting you to not get hacked, not get screwed. Move forward, reach a point where you are big enough to actually leverage those tools and then deploy those tools.
Very interesting, Anant. I think I faced the same problem when I joined Deloitte. And I got a laptop and I was joined as a pen tester, right? And for like 2 weeks, I couldn't do anything on it because I'm like, I cannot install Kali Linux on this. I cannot use any other computer on this. So what exactly do I do sit here? So I was sitting and drafting reports. But yeah, that does make sense. You have to start from like a level considering that you cannot trust that person and slowly kind of bring that up. Very interesting way to look at it, Anant. A very different opinion from many people who come on the podcast. I'll move into a different kind of a question now. With regards to entering the cybersecurity space, right? That is something that has also changed over the past, couple of years. I'm not sure exactly, how many people. I think it's different for every person how they got into the overall space. I don't think anybody has really a degree in overall cybersecurity because of which they've gotten into it. Neither have I, neither have you, nor does most people, right? What do you think has become the best way for people to enter the InfoSec space? I understand that you have participated in several capture the flag events. What is your opinion on capture the flag events, participating in them, building your initial network out of that? Because that's something I did as well, so I could potentially relate. But what is your opinion on entering into it?
So what has majorly changed from the way we were to what I see now? There are universities which are offering cybersecurity degree. Although anyone that you talk about, they would say, hey, those degree courses are crap. There is not enough information in them. Those are entry level. But the way I look at it is, what we learned in our school or colleges, physics or chemistry, we don't use it directly day to day, but it's an indirect usage that we have. Knowing the basics, knowing how the network actually operates, how the infrastructure works, what are the basic security principles, is going to be a helpful thing. So people who are going through those structured learning, they are at a good place to start with. However, the way our industry is, we are not yet mature. What that means is the industry is a fast-moving industry. By the time you enter a cybersecurity degree and by the time you leave that, the fields that were there at the start are all gone. The technology would have changed drastically. Like if you look at past 3 years, from being a crypto-laden industry or cryptocurrency-laden industry to being a decentralized industry to now we are into AI industry space. Everyone wants to be an AI thing.
Correct.
So the whole shift happens on a very frequent basis. Now, with that in mind, the important bit is not just to have a structured learning, but also start involving in things like you mentioned CTF. CTF is there, bug bounty is there. Lots of resources are available to people compared to what it was like 10 years or 20 years back. Right now, systems are powerful enough. You can run virtual machines. You can deploy a vulnerable machine, play around with it. You don't have to worry about competing with others. CTF specifically have been very helpful. And I can name a particular group. There's a team called Team Bios that comes from
Amrita.
the university. If you look at people who have come from Team Bios for past 5 to 6 years, you would see the trajectory they have been able to take, because by the time they reached the industry, they were already ahead of the game. Similarly, events like Google Summer of Code, that also helps people build their not just profile, but also the acumen to deal with security in general. So yeah, CTF, bug bounties, Google Summer of Codes, all of this should be done as much as possible.
Makes sense, Anant. It's very interesting. You bring up Amrita, because in my overall CTF journey as well, everywhere, I think Amrita has been the top team in India. And you speak to people over there, they have a very strong cybersecurity culture, oddly enough. The people over there really understand technical security compared to many other universities. So I was the first person to establish a CTF team and kind of set that up in my university. But we were always competing 7th, 8th place against Amrita. So just joining these communities, being a part of them has, I think, you say it very correctly, has been invaluable, and that's really grown these people up. Looking at communities on their own, you've been a part of several overall InfoSec communities in India as well as abroad. It could be OWASP, it could be Null, it could be any other community as well. Why do you think it is important to be involved in a community once you already have an entry into cybersecurity? Maybe you're a security engineer at an organization or something. How much time should someone commit to actually engaging in a community rather than upskilling themselves?
Okay. So the way I look at it, on one side, you cannot look at the entire landscape of InfoSec industry alone. You need people who are dealing with diverse environments, and you need a place where all of you can sit together and discuss. So we talk about null meets or WASP meets. Effectively, what is happening is you sit at a place and you get to hear 3 or 4 different people who have done different researches talking about what they have learned. So that's a crystallized and like distilled information that you get. What you can make a decision at that point is, do you want to pursue that research area, or do you want to explore that area, or you just want to shelf that knowledge for a later point in time? But you are aware of that. It's like CEH. Everyone hates CEH. I love that certificate.
You love CEH?
Not because it gives you any practical info, but it ensures that every single keyword that exists in InfoSec space, you have heard it once. Next time you hear that word, it's not a stranger word for you. That's the whole purpose of that certificate.
Anand, this is very interesting to hear from you, because when I did CEH, I hated it. It's the most horrible certification I've ever done. Right? I'm like, this is so stupid. But whenever I do talk about CEH in a positive way, what you are saying is the only thing I can talk about. Right? Okay, this was the first thing I did in life, and it cleared up all the terminology for me. So that really does make sense.
And
understood.
Overall, communities are for collaborative learning. That's the basic. And people who are from my kind of experience range, we were able to learn things only because we were part of the community.
Makes sense. And when people are doing things together as well, you are pushed further to explore it. You get good peer review from what you are doing. They motivate you as well in general. So, and in fact, a lot of the young security engineers I hear nowadays, they may not be involved in a larger community like a Null or an OWASP, but small Discord channels will be involved. And just network over there, discuss over there. That on its own has been kind of very helpful for them to grow their overall spaces. Coming to these meetups and Null and everything else, I've seen that, of course, you've been a trainer at various Indian as well as international conferences. What was your most memorable talk or interaction that you've had at one of these events? Could be technical, non-technical. If you have one, would love for you to talk about it.
There's not one single interaction, but yeah, there are lots of interactions that happen. And what I would probably like to talk about is the learnings that I had from those. The fun learnings were not to use Wikipedia as official source.
Why is that?
And okay, if you use Wikipedia as the official source, I can go edit that source right then and there, and the source changes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but Wikipedia does have a lot of peer review going on. I tried making my own.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
for the time being, I can convince you.
Mm-hmm.
By the
Okay,
time an
makes
editor
sense.
spots.
Makes sense.
So
Yeah,
not using it as an official source is a very important thing. Remember to cite all your references, whatever is your source, because if your source is inaccurate, you are inaccurate double times. And if you're not citing your source, you are the one responsible for whatever you have listed. So
correct.
Citing sources was an important thing. The other thing that came out, and this came out after about a year or 2 years of delivering sessions, the sessions are not for me. They're not for me to read. They're not for me to understand. The sessions are for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
The audience are there to listen. The audience are there to understand. So make it clear for them. Don't leave assumptions. Like when we start, so let's say I start talking about OWASP top 10 mobile item number 5.
Yeah.
If I make an assumption that they're already aware what is item number 5, that is a mistake at my end. I have to assume that I have to give some basic reference or caveat my presentation that, hey, you know what? I have made assumptions that you're aware of these topics. Going forward, I am going to keep that assumption and work from there. So I can't teach everyone CIA triad every single time. But I can make an assumption that this presentation is for security professionals who are 2 to 4 years experienced, which means you are aware of CIA triad, you're aware of OWASP top 10, you're aware of basic web bugs. And then I can take from there.
I think that's how, a very exceptional trainer comes forth. And that's really great how you actually do it. Another reference, another person that I've seen actually do this is InfoSec, if you know who he is.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's always, started everything from scratch. And if he's introducing a new concept, he talks about it for half an hour, doesn't matter. But if he's, working on a top of a concept, he will, refer to a previous video, and he has a website called ipsec.rocks where he has documented all these videos. So it makes very easy to learn from that end.
The last thing is make your presentations in such a way that they are useful to people after the presentation is done. When there is a PDF uploaded somewhere, when there is a slider available somewhere, it should make sense to them at that level also. So your graphics, your imaginations, and your animations, they should land up in such a way that the final output is readable.
Makes sense. I think everybody has to really take back something that they can implement in their own, practice. I guess that's the whole point. They're not just there to watch a movie, right? Sometimes people are there, some interesting CIA and all those talks I've seen on Black Hat get very popular. But yeah, that is for sure there. With regards to, changing gears, looking at your open source, experience, so you've worked in 2, open source projects from what I can see, Android Tamer and Code Vigilant. Would love to understand briefly exactly what they do, what is their value. And, more interestingly, would love to understand, and this is especially important in this world where open source is becoming so important. What is the reward that you get out of it? Right? What is the value that you see out of it? So I've seen a lot of open source maintainers get crazy, just, trying to handle the project. I've seen one guy just abandon his project, shut down a project. So of course there is a lot of work involved over there, but with I'm not sure what exactly returns are coming out of it. So very curious to understand.
Yep. So Android Tamer is now renamed to Tamer Platform. That's the project name that I'm going with. Tamer Platform is effectively a space where I'm trying to create an environment where we started with just Android. We're now trying to expand into other areas also. But within Android space, the major problem was that tools were fragmented. There was one tool written in Java, another in Ruby, one in Ruby 1.5, one in Ruby 1.6, Java 1.7, 1.8, and the whole cluster F of so many different languages and versions of different languages. So I basically sat down and built an environment where all these tools can coexist and cooperate. So a person who is doing anything related to Android security does not have to spend time trying to fiddle around. Hey, I got this tool running in Ruby 2.6, but because of these 5 other tools broke, because they were running on Ruby 2.5. That sort of problem is what I basically tried to handle with Tamer platform.
Makes sense. Saving security engineer time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this was way old. The Tamer platform started 2011. So that was the time frame when people were still experimenting. Every alternate day, there would be a tool available which does something in Android. So piecing them together, making them work in a cohesive environment where a person can just have a VM, just do an apt-get update, get all the tools updated, install a tool via apt-get, those sort of things is what we aimed at Tamer platform. Coming to Code Vigilant. So Code Vigilant actually came out of null meets. So I was mulling around the idea of how to do code reviews. I was not someone who was well versed with code reviews. This was 2014. And I was talking about it in a meet in like a small setup. Like a couple of us were sitting together and I was just like, yeah, I want to explore source code review and this and that. Another person comes up and says, hey, why don't we do it together? And that's how Code Vigilant started. So the other person was Prajal Kulkarni, who is right now the CISO for Grow. So we both started out and we took WordPress as our target. And we picked WordPress themes and WordPress plugin ecosystem. Back in 2014, we did the analysis and we ended up finding about 300 different bugs. We reported all of them, got them fixed, got them listed. Cut to 2021, we kind of kept the whole project on pause for that time frame. 2021 is when we restarted. And by this time, the whole field has matured. From using grep and trying to filter out the results and figuring out the whole setup, we now had semgrep, which was allowing us to do far more structured searches. So we again went back, did the same targets, found another about 100 SQL injections, reported them to the vendors and got them fixed. And we are continuously working on that project. Now, these are publicly available, made available, not because I wanted something out of them, but because I wanted to do it. And that's the key for open source. Don't do open source because you're expecting something from the open source or expecting something as a return. Do it because you want to. If you want to make living out of open source, I would not recommend that. If you're building a product which you're saying that, hey, I'm going to open source it and then I'm going to make money out of services, I would not recommend it. There are examples. Red Hat has a clear example where they effectively made service industry as their base platform, made a hell lot of money, got acquired and whatnot. But that's not an easy job. The way I look at open source, and this comes from a definition when I have been involved with open source communities since 2000 onwards. So open source for me is basically a medium of expression. I did something I want to share to everyone else. This is what I did. This is what I wrote. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm not expecting any return in, because I shared something. I don't expect people to recognize me because I shared something. It's just, I liked what I did. I just wanted it to be available for others to see.
Makes sense, Anant. And, that's, I think, how all open source projects start. Like somebody is really passionate about some technology, they just spent a weekend writing some interesting code and they're like, okay, let's publish it on GitHub and, we'll keep maintaining it, seeing how it goes. Well, a couple of people are interested in it. I think the core challenge arises when it starts getting distribution and starts being used by hundreds and hundreds of people. And when that happens, I believe, there is an expectation of maintaining it. So then it becomes like a job. So that expectation of maintaining, has led to some incidents happen, as you can imagine. But as long as I guess you're committed to it, that thing can go on.
Yeah. I mean, you can make a call. Like a lot of my projects, I've made a very specific call. These are my projects. I am doing them out of my own goodwill. You want some feature, you are free to fork it, rename it, do whatever you want to do with it. I am not responsible for maintaining it for others. I'm doing it for myself. I see. But that means I'm not going to make money. I'm not going to get sponsorship, and that's fine.
Got it. Coming back to, you spoke about Code Vigilant. I didn't exactly understand what you guys do. Right? So I've spent a lot of time, I spent hours, in fact, days doing source code review. And I've done it in .NET and Python, Java, whatnot, right? So I've seen how crazy it can get. In fact, VS Code on its own is a great tool for me to use, right? Just while doing that. What exactly does Code Vigilant do? Is it like a project wherein you and Prajwal, very well, are basically just hacking on, just doing your own thing, like a thing, or is it a tool per se? Did not exactly
No,
understand that.
it's not a tool. It's not a tool. It's
Okay.
basically we built it as a public place where whatever
Mhm.
we find, we make it available. Prajal is taking a break from the project right now, so he's in the backgrounds. He's not actively involved with the project. But there are a couple of other people. There's Shiraj, there's Shreya, who have been actively working with. So what we have been trying to do is leverage all these newer things that are there in the system. So back in
Mhm.
2014, getting a bug reporting system in place and getting all the pieces together at one place was a major hurdle. But
Correct.
2022, what we have internally built, and this is something which is a work in progress right now.
Mhm.
We've got SemGrep as our code review software, which does the manual
Right.
code, the automated code reviews for us. Outputs of SemGrep get piped into Defect Dojo. And
Mhm.
Defect Dojo is where we look at those bugs and say, okay, yeah, this is a false positive. This is actually useful. Based on whatever we are marking as false positive, we go back, update our rules. So
Mhm.
the rules is what we are writing basically.
Correct.
Once those rules are written, we pipe them in, get them into Defect Dojo, and then we're like, okay, yeah, these need to be reported to the people. So we go ahead, get it reported to the vendors, get those
Mhm.
fixes in, and then make it available publicly. So
Got it. Got it. So something like a zero-day initiative or something like that.
kind of,
Yeah.
but not at that big of a level. We're
Okay.
still
Okay.
very
Got it.
low. We're very small. But the way I am looking at it is, and the way I involve people with it is, uh, so I come from a very small town, Bhopal. Not a lot of IT activities happen here. There are, I
Mhm.
think, a handful of people who are IT professionals in this city. So the
Right.
aim that we had for Null Meets here was ensure that at least one person or two-person from our group gets a good IT or IT security related job. As a
Mhm.
result of being involved in the community, they learn and then they are able to
I
get
see.
a job and move outside. And then the way we operate is I helped you, you helped two others, and the way pyramid flows.
Yeah.
So we bring in people to work with Code Vigilant. Effectively, I work with them. Shiraj and Shreya are also trying to help around here. We bring in people who are interested in doing this. We help them understand what we are doing, because although SemGrep would find bugs, but those bugs needs to be validated. We need to
Correct.
find the right place, validate them, create POCs, learn what exactly went there. So that's kind of the internship kind of opportunities we make available via Code Vigilant. Hey, we're exposing things to you. You learn, the project gets some bugs under its name, and it's a win-win for everyone.
I think this is very interesting, Anant, and this coming back to the overall getting into InfoSec. I feel that if you're a youngster who has passion, directly getting a job is tough unless you have all the connects in the world, right? So just showing a passion, working for free, and it's not like working for free, right? It's working for interest, right?
Yeah,
With someone who has experience, who you can show that you really are kind of doing work in this field. They can then extend referrals for you since you have done work for them. That's,
yeah,
I think, a very good way to get into the space. But that's how I've hired a couple of people as well.
yeah.
So that's been pretty awesome. Um,
So uh,
Now, yeah,
just
go on.
just a note here for everyone who is watching, who are like freshers or undergrads. I know for a fact at least 10 or 20 different people who were active in null community events, who were presenting at null community events while they were students. And
Mhm.
including myself, there were like 5, 10 different people who were like, I am waiting for this person to graduate so that I can hire them.
Yeah,
And that is a ground reality that is going to happen if you start showing your skills, if you start showing up. The most important thing is show up and make your presence feel. So it should not be that you're part of that whole 200 or 500 people or like 10 people. You need to make your presence felt. You deliver
I
talk,
can
you deliver
2x vouch for what Anant is saying. I already have a list of 5 people who I want to hire after they graduate. Already taken them as interns, and the only thing that they really did different is just reach out to me saying that how can I work for you?
yeah.
They were all a part of the BugBase community and so on. But yeah, they said that okay, I'm like let's interview. Okay, you've done this work. Come on, let's get started. And
Yeah.
the first, in fact, full-time cybersecurity guy we hired, we also were scaling up was through this. Who was an intern first. He just graduated college. We're like, come to Bangalore. So that is something that is really there, and I can see how you have a hands-on experience with it. So Anant, moving into a bit more of maybe a technical topic. So you have extensive experience with mobile application security, right? Many people do not. Right? Most people are fixed on web or something like that. So in web, we've seen that there is a set of exploits that are most commonly found through which you get a bounty, right? Which could be generally it's a business logic exploit through which you can get a P1, which can lead to either say a forgot password functionality problem or say something of that sort, right? Which leads to a critical vulnerability being found on mobile. Beyond the standard API vulnerabilities that are there, right? Of course, the same one that could be applicable on web. What is the commonest high criticality vulnerability that you often see, that developers make a mistake of? That is something that the bug bounty hunters watching could look out for. The
So
top one.
I'm not going to give a specific vulnerability, but I'll give a methodology that you can follow.
Okay.
When it comes to web application, there is always a trusted anchor, which is the server. You cannot touch the server till you have a web server related bug. It's
Correct.
always the client side that you're dealing with. In mobile, leave aside the API because API is the lowest hanging fruit that is there. And effectively, you are doing web application pen testing when you're dealing with APIs. The mobile itself is a fully hostile territory for the application.
Okay.
When an application is running, you don't know whether the mobile device is already hacked, whether the device owner is a hostile entity for the application. You are operating in a hostile territory, which means anything and everything that a developer can think about can be broken, can be bypassed. Okay. It's a matter of how much time and effort is required. It goes both ways. For developers, they need to remember that they cannot secure. What that also does not mean is you don't go zero. It's not an all or nothing approach that, hey, I can't secure anything, I'm not going to add security measures. You add security measures, you add complexity to the equation. Make it harder for people to get inside your application. The harder it is, more cost is involved, and a person is going to make a choice. Do I want to continue doing this and waste my time and effort, or do I want to go and find an easy target?
This is really bad for ethical hackers out there. I've seen mobile applications obfuscated to the greatest of lengths, encrypted in the weirdest of ways. But Anand, looking at this, what you're talking about, defense in depth, right? Just absolutely, just making it complicated. How far do you think this can really take someone with regards to, just security? Do you think just doing this is enough at this stage?
No, doing that is not enough. But I'll give you a very simple example. If your API has a SQL injection, you have a problem. So at that point, if your app is SSL pinned, it might take out. So if I take a spectrum of 0 to 10 of the attacker skill set, a person knowing how to bypass SSL spinning, knowing the right tool and knowing the right script to use with the whole modern tool set is now at about 2 or 3, 10 being the highest sophistication level. You're still cutting out anyone from 0 to 3 level. You're still reducing the amount of people who are going to attack you. Now, if they're able to break SSL pinning and your data is signed, your requests are signed, then you again raise the complexity to 5 or 6. They have to understand what the algorithm is, then do the whole signing, and then they are able to get in. Then if you have validation and whatnot, so look at it from a developer point of view. By the time people are able to bypass SSL pinning and figure out what is going on in the encryption side or the checksum side, you have got lead time to work on your SQL injection problem. So you fix that. That's the whole game. There is no 100% security anywhere.
Mhm.
Whatever security measures you implement, tomorrow there's a bug in your OS itself, everything is gone.
Correct.
So you can't assume that you will reach 100% level, but you will increase the complexity. And that's the game that you have to play.
Agreed. I think adding these layers from a developer perspective totally makes sense. But it's always a security engineer versus developer thing going on in my head. And I'm just thinking, okay, if I get that application to be exploited, how painful will that be? So give a debugging application to your VAPT vendor, but
Yeah.
on the production application, do add these layers, and that does make sense. So, Anand, now moving on to your overall, blog and, with regards to your future prospects. You've been writing a blog for 15 years now. That's crazy. Some people watching this podcast maybe 15 years old, right? I'm very curious to understand, how you exactly decide what to write on. What is the topic that you pick up? Do you just look at Twitter and say that, okay, this is interesting, I research on it, write about it? And right now, what is your most interesting thing to talk about?
All right. So topics that I pick were all random. So my blog has never been a place where I'll focus on one specific topic. It has been about my journey. I am from that era when blogging used to be for fun, when blogging
Correct.
used to be for, hey, I did something I want to share with the world. It could be like I read Harry Potter 7. I wanted to talk about it. So I wrote a blog post about it. Things like that. But effectively, the landscape has evolved from the early days when blog used to be the only way by which you can communicate. Then came MySpace and Orkut, and then came Facebook, and then came the whole Twitter and other areas. You got a lot of avenues to express yourself now. So if you see my blog also, there was a blip in my blogging when all these social medias were predominantly the major players, because I was talking more there. But then with the current whole set of, what's the new name? Is it X, or did they change it already to something else?
X.
This is still X? Yeah. So Twitter to X, and then whatever is going on there, with Facebook doing all sorts of random stuff with their own platform, other platforms like trying to monetize things, Reddit closing their APIs, and all sorts of shit going around in social media space. I am now moving back towards my blog where I'm like, okay, yeah, if I have to write, I want to preserve whatever I write. Because like I said before, the reason is not because I wanted to gain likes. The reason is I found something interesting. I want to preserve it. A lot of times I even search for things that I've written in my blog, because 5 years later, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did something like that. Where did I wrote it? And I can go back to my blog and I'm like, oh, that was the way I used it. So it's a reference for myself. If others gain benefit out of it, that's a +1 on top of it. Now, when you talked about the current areas that I'm exploring, so mobile has been an area which has been in my sort of bloodstream for a very long time. But I am right now at a crossroad where I'm basically fiddling around what goes as a blog post on my personal blog, what goes as a blog post on my company blog. So a lot of topics which are around mobile, which are around, let's say, decentralized web, which are around supply chain, would now go on my company blog. A lot of things which are more around, say, personal knowledge management, around automation, that's what is now going to get funneled towards my personal blog now. So that's the topics that I'm dealing with.
Got it. No, I think that's very interesting, maintaining a personal blog as well as a company blog. And in your company blog, since it's your own company, it's kind of, still having that point, but also getting a business opportunity out of there. So that is super smart. Recently, I saw that you had posted a bit about AI, right? And you can see how the overall, everyone, in fact, and you earlier mentioned it as well, is trying to get into the overall AI space. So we at BugBase have been also quite, involved in seeing how we can get LLMs for cybersecurity, see how we can implement AI, and I have personally seen some bug bounty hunters, use ChatGPT for making their reports. Right? So that's like a basic level wherein it has direct product market fit. What is your opinion on, AI, LLMs, transformers, and how this whole space is growing? and how it will affect the overall InfoSec space, right? In general. Will it make critical thinking redundant? Because that's what security engineers were always known for, like thinking creatively. And this thing right here is able to think creatively.
So the way I look at the current AI/LLM models, the simplest example that I can think of, and I think part of it is what I read somewhere, and part of it is my own imagination on top of it. Imagine a child which was born in a library. They were taught how to identify alphabets, and that's about it. That's all they knew. They were having access to thousands and thousands of books. And by the time they turned 18, they had no interaction with anyone else in the world, but they have read every single book.
Right.
All they knew was how to identify alphabets. So they were able to form words with those alphabets, and they were able to read all the books. When I say read the words on those books. Now what they've got is a very, very good memory about what comes next after this specific word. Or if this particular set of strings are there, strings being that word, these words were more commonly found in these books. And in these books, this word was followed by this next word. So the way LLM models have been operating is they're stringing words after another.
Correct.
And the way they do it is because their training model has given them the capability to identify the weightage for what is the next useful word in this context. So that's what there is. What we have to take as a feedback from it is how repetitive our whole world is. Because when we look at that output, we feel like, oh, this is awesome. The machine is thinking. A lot of it is not actually thinking. It's a pattern that is identified and the pattern that is repeated. Be it bug bounty, be it pen testing. If I feed, let's say, all the reports that were ever submitted to HackerOne or BugCrowd or BugBase, whatever, all the reports that were ever submitted to these platforms into a system. And then I ask a question, give me a list of parameters that might be vulnerable to XSS. It'll give me a list of the most dominant parameters that are XSS vulnerable. If I take that and then go to a website and I go like, okay, yeah, for this website, I will only test for XSS when this specific parameter exists. I will have a very high chance of finding XSS because it is based on a repetitive pattern of how the bugs have been found. Now, what I told you, this can be done via AI. This was done manually also. Jason Haddix actually went on and did exactly this, created a plugin for Burp, which was doing exactly this. It had a list of most commonly exploited parameters for a specific type of bug, and it'll test for those bugs and those parameters. So the patterns are there. AI is finding those patterns, making them accessible to us. It helps you to go from 0 to maybe 50, 60. 60 to 100 is where humans would come in.
Right.
It's easy to say after it is going to be there, but it is difficult to say, okay, you know what? I have never seen this parameter in my life. By looking at this application, I feel this might be XSS and testing XSS there. It's not randomly doing things. It's a gut intuition that you apply. That's something AI at this point does not have. May have it in future, I don't know. But right at this point, the kind of AI systems or the LLM systems that we have does not have that. So that's where you'll still need humans.
Oh, fair enough, Ananta. So, we looked at this problem as well quite deeply. In fact, we are recently launching a tool called Pentest Copilot. So it does flow into the same model that, okay, humans are required at the end of the day. But what I have personally seen in analyzing all this, right, is that you were saying that okay, XSS is there, so these parameters, what is more likely, what would be the more likely parameter? I have seen it perform extremely well in the sense that okay, this is the website, this is what the API is, what could be the most probable exploit in there, right? So identifying that aspect, which is what you're saying, the security engineer is able to do. Um, the AI is able to do it pretty well as well, right? So the GPT side of things, and it's an evolving space, right? It's understanding context very well. Early on, it used to be just these bigram models wherein okay, for based on first word, it's guessing the second word. Now you have all this cross attention and all this insanity. It is certainly, I would say, making it accessible. But at the end of the day, what do you think will be the security engineer's role if AI is able to get to this point as well? Because it is certainly getting there. I'm seeing it move to that kind of.
So let's compare it with computer systems.
Okay.
Back in the days when calculators used to be there, and imagine a role of a finance person. When computers came, did finance person lost their whole job? They ended up babysitting the computers. That's kind of the approach that I take with AI at this point. There will be systems, there will be things, and a lot of automation would happen, a lot of things would happen. And like I keep saying, the pattern of repetition is the key here. What we don't realize is the whole world is not operating in unique manners, but there is a lot of repetition, there is a lot of patterns which are not able to see at the visual angle at where we are. But for a system which is able to grasp more inputs, that pattern becomes much more visible. So it's still a pattern that people are, the AI systems are dealing with. What I'm talking about is, even if the AI systems are in place, I'll give a very weird example. Imagine a scenario, two organizations are talking with each other, doing X number of things. What used to happen earlier was a very wordy article like an email would be written, the other person would read that email, find flaws in it, send it across, and the whole conversations would happen. Now what is happening is, on one side, a person is writing to AI, hey, I want to convey this 1 point, write me a 10-pointer to convey this 1 point. That email goes to the other side says, hey, this is a very large email, summarize it for me. And you get that 1 pointer out of it.
I saw this. This was by that comic writer. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, exactly. There was a comic about it also. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's happening. That's happening here. What will happen at the end of the day is, whatever was the initial thought, whatever is the final point, there is a human involved there. In terms of security landscape, a machine can find all sorts of bugs. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's say there's an organization which has, and I'm going to give weird large numbers here, have 1 million assets. Of those 1 million assets, there are, let's say, 500,000 which are vulnerable to XSS. And there is like 5 or 6 which are vulnerable to SQL injection. Now, again, there would be CVSS in picture, there would be EPSS in picture, and lots of permutation and combination that would come into picture. And at one point, there would be someone making the final call, do I want to fix it or not? That someone could be an AI in future, but right now, that would be a human because there would be human angles involved. People cannot still trust AI to a level where there is a repeatable pattern. And the simplest example of it is, if I give a similar question to the AI system, and that's where the black box part of models come into picture. If I give a similar question to AI system with your ID, with my ID, or with your ID 2 times, the answer is going to be different. There would be slight variation in the answer. So we are still in that phase. So I used to give this example for the field of medicine versus the field of information security, that medicine is a science right now because there's documented procedures and ways to operate. InfoSec is still an art because no one knows what they're doing. Everyone is trying to do certain things. What will happen with this is, one, people will get more structured. There would be science involved in it, which is going to help us refine the whole system. And the whole refining would come from human inputs. So at one point, it may happen that the entire field of information security, whatever we call as information security, would become like something which is all automated already, which is like what DevSecOps and DevOps and all sorts of jargons have been claiming that they will do. They will automate the shit out of information security. AI might be able to help us doing that, which means we are now free to do more useful tasks, because no one hates it more than someone who has to deal with the XSS with a CVSS score of 9.8 base on a machine which is internally deployed and not connected to anywhere else.
Correct.
So why deal with all of these when AI can actually help us? Maybe that's where the path would be. There's a lot of unknowns in this.
Makes sense. I think that's very interesting. I think it makes sense in my head as well. The overall point that, and all the research that is out there still says that AI can't predict social outcomes, right? In the sense that there is a decision to be made that is, not technical in nature. It cannot predict what will be right or not. And this was done by like a research that, okay, they looked at thousands of children's habits. And based on that, they try to, predict whether they will get married at a certain age, they will get arrested at a certain age, and things like that. But there was a very interesting article that was extremely inaccurate, right? And this was against what everybody was thinking, that, oh no, it will be able to do that, and then we'll be able to give insurance based on this. So that is for sure there. I don't think, we're at that stage yet. As long as we're not at that stage, I guess, cybersecurity with regards to decision making is something that helps. Once we do get to that stage, I guess, there are a lot of other problems that will also come. We will look at addressing. But thank you so much, Anant. This was a pleasure talking to you with the overall podcast. I got to learn so many things. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. We are over an hour, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.